Good evening. Daf Yomi for the month. One second, let me just pull out my sponsors here. Is sponsored by Michael Tzaidi for Hatzlach with making Aliyah in honor of his late father Zohar ben Ruvain Zichrono Livracha, and Daf Yomi for the month is sponsored by Moshe and Susie Feder, Le'ilui Nishmas, Mr. Feder's father, Aryeh ben Michal, whose yortzeit was on the 15th velo, and Le'ilui Nishmas, Mrs. Feder's mother, Roiza Bas Simcha Cohen, whose yortzeit was on the 18th velo. May their neshamos have an aliyah. And tonight's daf, beer and wings, are sponsored by Mark and Karen Posner in honor of Roy Mashkovitz's bar mitzvah. Mazel tov. Thank you very, very much. There is a Kahal Yereim schedule, Daf Yomi schedule for the week, special times. We are going to be learning tomorrow, for example, 9 a.m., not at the regular 8:30 p.m. Chol Moed, 9 p.m. on Wednesday, 5 p.m. on Thursday. Please see the app, your WhatsApp posting for the complete schedule. We'll go through all of the dates, but that's at least the ones that are upcoming. If you show up at 8:30, you will miss Daf Yomi every night, other than Sunday, which is the night you will think it's not.
Okay, I'll be there. I'll be there 8:30. Don't worry.
So
we're taking the shiur out of the base medrash,
right,
and into the sukkah.
Traveling shiur.
Yeah,
we're going to have the sukkah the sukkah additions. Tomorrow morning shiur is here.
Yes.
The night Wednesday and Chol Moed, the shiur is in the walled sukkah, 183 North Meadow Crescent, and Thursday's shiur is early 5 p.m. in my sukkah. I got the okay. I'm not sure. I think I might be having pretzels, so we'll have a ship sukkah. Huh?
9 a.m. 9 a.m. here.
9 a.m. here. So there you go. Mark your calendars, and let's get ourselves going. We were talking this morning. We got to a new Mishnah finally, and that led us to have a conversation about what happens the morning of Erev Pesach. So we know that the rules for Korban Pesach change when it's the time for a Korban Pesach and when it's not the time of a Korban Pesach. If it's not the official time for a Korban Pesach, and I shecht for the sake of a Korban Pesach, that ruins my Korban, because you can't have a Korban Pesach when it's not time for Korban Pesach. If I shecht it for the sake of Korban Pesach when it is time for Korban Pesach, that's kosher. The reverse, if it's the time for Korban Pesach and I shecht it not for the sake of a Korban Pesach, that won't be valid. But if I shecht it when it's not the time for Korban Pesach, having in mind that it shouldn't be for Korban Pesach, it turns into a shlamim and is okay. Not that it counts as a Korban Pesach for the person who's bringing it, but that the offering can still be brought as a Korban shlamim. So in our Mishnah, we had an argument between Rabbi Yehoshua and Ben Beseira. Rabbi Yeshua says that if somebody is in the morning of the 14th, and we said that the time for bringing a Korban Pesach is the afternoon of the 14th. So he says that if you bring your Korban Pesach, if you bring it shelo lishmo, not for the right purpose, on Erev Pesach morning, then it's kosher. Why? Because he's saying it's not the right time for a Korban Pesach. Right? Since it's not the right time for Korban Pesach, then it's like bringing it, as he says, it's like you brought it on the 13th. Ben Beseira says, no, that's the time for the Korban Pesach, therefore it is invalid if you bring it right now. So the Gemara wants to know, what are they saying? Are they saying that you can really, like, let's say you showed up and you actually brought a Korban Pesach. Would it work or would it not? So they said it's the same argument. They said, well, why don't they argue about bringing the Korban Pesach rather than whether it's kosher if you don't bring it for the sake of Korban Pesach? And they say because you might have thought that despite the fact that you might hold that that the Korban Pesach is not valid if you bring it on the morning of the 14th, you might think it's still a little like the time to bring Korban Pesach, and and if you bring it not for the sake of the Korban Pesach, it would still be valid. Therefore, we are bringing it in this way in order to show that basically it's a unified rule. At least at this point in our Gemara. The Gemara is going to change its mind a little bit later. Just that's what's happening later today. But now, the problem is that the Torah specifically says that the Korban Pesach is supposed to be brought bein ha'arbayim, right, between the evenings. And there are multiple times which are considered the afternoons and the evenings in halacha, right? We have different times of the afternoons. And so bein ha'arbayim generally means from the earliest afternoon time, which is 12, 6.5 hours into the day, all the way until it gets to be shkia until nightfall. So that's what we presume to be our bein ha'arbayim times. Then how do you understand what bein ha'arbayim means? And we answered, well, bein ha'arbayim means between the evenings, from last night until tonight, which means from morning until night, you have the entire day as a valid time for bringing a Korban Pesach. That's what Ben Beseira said. So now we have a problem, because if you're going to interpret the phrase bein ha'arbayim to mean all day, We have many mitzvos which are supposed to be done specifically in the afternoon. The Torah uses the phrase Bein Harbayim to tell us when to do them. And if you're going to interpret Bein Harbayim to mean all day, how are you going to understand why those mitzvos have to be done in the afternoon? So that's where we are. We're at Veha Kesiv, which is in the middle of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines up from the bottom, and right in the middle. Veha Kesiv, Bein Harbayim. He says it's Bein Harbayim. Amar Ula Brei Derav Eloi. So Ula said that in Rabbi Eloi, Bein Shnei Aravim. It means between the morning and the evening. It's all day long. Okay, now the problem with that is Tamid. What about the Korban Tamid? The Korban Tamid is brought 2 times during the day. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon. Dichsiv Bei, it says by the Korban Tamid, Bein Harbayim. The second one is supposed to be brought Bein Harbayim. Hachinami de Kula Yoma Kasher. What are you going to say? There, it's also the entire day? So Hasam Midichsiv Esakeves Echad Toseba Boker, Mikal de Bein Harbayim Mamish. Well, there, really the term Bein Harbayim can mean either one of those 2 things. Could mean afternoon, it could mean all day. How do you know when to use which? Well, you can't possibly interpret the Korban Tamid to mean all day because we already know there's one that's brought in the morning. The pasuk says, right, Echad Taseh Baboker, you're going to do one of the Korban Tamids in the morning. Hence, when the second one says Bein Harbayim, it must mean the afternoon.
Why would it be called Ben Harbayim if it's in the afternoon?
Well, so that's a good question. So the phrase Bein Harbayim is, I'm trying to remember exactly how it is, which are the 2 Erevs, but the Erev is from the Herav Shemesh once the sun starts to go down in the sky, which is 12 to 6.5 hours into the day. So right in the afternoon.
Quarters.
It's basically between the evening times, Mincha Gedola, all the way through to the end. Correct. It's going to be all in the afternoon times. That's what we say, the Erev, from the time that it begins to become towards Erev. Okay. Right, amongst that Erev timing. That's how we have always interpreted it, but now we're not, so that's a little bit interesting. So he says, okay, but even still, why don't you just say that the first one has to be brought in the morning and the other one can be brought all day? That's an answer. So he says, no, it says echad baboker. It says you have to bring one of them in the morning, which means only one can be brought in the morning. The other one cannot be brought in the morning. Velo shnayim baboker, not 2 in the morning. So therefore, one is in the morning, one has to be in the afternoon. Okay, so we don't have a problem with
the one in the morning. What do you mean that Korban Shloima and then the one in
No, it's Korban Tamid. Both Korban Tamid, they're both Olas, right? They're identical, right? Just one's brought in the morning, one's brought in the afternoon. If you daven Nutzach Sfard, which I hope you do if you're here, right? Then we say Korbanos, right? Before Shachris and before Mincha. Because
I think it's Hasidic minhag to do Korbanos.
Right, it's Nusach Sfard, right? And Sfard also, right? So other than just Ashkenazim, just skip stuff. So, so that's why it's there because we had Korbanos before Mincha and Korban before Shachris. Okay, what about Neiros? What about the lighting of the candles, the lighting of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash? It says there Bein Harbayim. Supposed to be done in the afternoon. Hachinami de Kul Yoma Kasher. You're going to tell me that that's also supposed to be done anytime during the day? No, Shani Halsam. That's different. Can't interpret Bein Harbayim as all day there. Why? Dichsiv me erev ad boker. It says that the candles are supposed to be lit from night all the way until the morning. The menorah candles have to be lit overnight. Well, if they have to be lit overnight, when are you lighting them? It doesn't make sense to light them in the morning if they have to last overnight. So therefore, okay, V'tanya we're in our Bryson, me erev ad boker. That has to be from the night until the morning. You have to fill it with enough oil so that when you light it, it will last all the way from the evening until the morning. So that means that if you're lasting from the evening to the morning, the time to light it is going to be as close to evening as possible. You don't want to light it too early because then you're going to run out of oil. Davar acher, right? Or else there's another potential answer to why the candles can't be all day. Right? The meaning is that you don't have any overnight service, right? Except for this one, right? That's what the pasuk means. Me'erev ad boker. The service of lighting the menorah is an avoda that takes place at night. Most other avodas they're only to take place during the day. Okay, Ketores. What about the burning of the incense? We do it twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. So Dichsiv, but says by the Ketores, Bein Harbayim. It also has to be Bein Harbayim. So hachinami de kul yoma kasher. So you're going to say what? The whole day is kasher to do it? No. Shani Ketores says by the Ketores it's different. Why? Because by the Ketores, got to turn a couple of pages. By the Ketores it says the itkish leneros. The psukim connect the lighting of the menorah to the burning of the Torahs. The pasuk says, "Ubehalos Aaron es haneros." When Aaron lights the candles, bein harbayim yakti rena. That's when you burn the incense. So therefore, if you're lighting the menorah in the evening, then you must be burning the incense in the evening as well.
Doesn't brachas break up the evening three shomrim, three different it's
The overnight. That's the shomrim of overnight.
right.
That's not the evening. Evening is before Shkia.
But, oh,
This is all in the afternoon, late afternoon, right? These are all mitzvahs that are done in the afternoon, not in the evening.
right. But I mean, obviously when evening begins, that's when night begins, evening ends. Right? I mean, Ben Ashmash versus the...
When evening, the word evening is confusing because evening could mean right? When the day ends, the night begins. Okay, let's just say that. The day is broken into a morning and an afternoon.
Right.
When the afternoon ends, that's when the night begins.
Right. Why would they work retroactively off that? Like the we know when the first shomrim starts, right? When
Well, because first of all, the shomrim is not a deoraisa rule, right? The Torah doesn't say you shall have three shomrim, right?
I thought the day started after the sunset.
Okay, so again, fair enough. Okay, the day, right? The entire 24-hour period starts after sunset, right? But then, when it comes to the laws of korbanos and the laws of, there's some mitzvos that have to be done during the daylight hours, and some mitzvos that are done at nighttime hours. Mitzvos that are done during daylight hours have to stop during the nighttime. Once you get to the nighttime.
Yeah.
So therefore, mitzvos like burning korbanos or sacrifices can only be done during the day. Once you get to nighttime, you cannot do them anymore. There are also some mitzvos that have to be done during afternoon or the morning. We daven chakras in the morning. We don't daven chakras in the afternoon, right? So therefore, at what period of time do each of these apply? When the Torah says, the problem that's facing us is, when the Torah uses the phrase, bein ha'arbayim, traditionally, we've understood that to be meaning in the afternoon period, which means from, if your daylight hours is divided into 12 hours, 6.5 hours into the day, all the way until the 12th hour of daylight hours. Because afternoon, right, you cannot call evening, you cannot call nightfall afternoon anymore. That's already changed to the next day, right?
Yeah, that's where my
correct. So but when I'm using the term, using the word day becomes confusing because when I'm talking about day in our Gemara, I'm talking about daylight. And when you're talking about day, you're talking about the calendar day, right? It's Shabbos from Friday night until Saturday night. It's Sukkot from Monday night until Tuesday night, right? But Sukkot is divided up into the nighttime and the daytime. And then the daytime of Sukkot is divided up into the morning and then the afternoon. Some mitzvos are going to apply only during one of those time periods. And the issue that we're having is now we've decided that the Korban Pesach can be brought all day on the day before Pesach, even though it says Bein Arbayim. Now we're struggling to figure out how to explain the phrase Bein Arbayim. So we say that even though Bein Arbayim really could mean all day long, when it comes to the Korban Pesach, it means all. Even though we see in all of these other psukim where it means afternoon, it means by the Korban Pesach all day long. Okay, that's what we're trying to prove. Now,
I think the real reason it's Ben Arbayim is not an entire day and only the daylight hours because it's not oddly specific enough. It's not oddly specific enough for halacha.
Oh, okay. Okay, so now, okay, so now, so Hasam Namiksiv, Sham Tizbachas HaPesach Ba'erev, it says though in the psukim though, if you're going to tell me that if I can find a hint in the psukim to indicate that the words Bein Arbayim means something other than all day, means afternoon in some reason, then that's how we're going to interpret it. Well, how do you understand now that the pasuk says, there you shall sacrifice the Pesach in the evening? Well, if the Korban Pesach brought in the evening, then how can you interpret Bein Ha'arbayim as meaning all day? If it can interpret it in two ways, I should be interpreting it as the afternoon because this pasuk seems to clearly indicate that it should be brought in the evening. Says the Gemara, Hahuli uchar davarhu da'asa. He says that is only to tell me that the Korban Pesach gets delayed as late as possible. Meaning, right? You could bring it all day, but once you get to the afternoon, bring your regular afternoon offerings first and Korban Pesach last, right? Because you might have thought, well, I should have been bringing my Korban Pesach all this time, So therefore, I bring my korban pesach before I do my korban mincha. No. The korban tamid shel bein arbayim comes first. We're going to push the korban pesach till last. That's what the point.
Starts 7 p.m. You bring your korban at 6:55.
Well, ideally much earlier because you're probably bringing about 500,000 offerings in the Beis Hamikdash all day long, right? So if they've got that many offerings to bring, they started as early as possible. They started like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, sacrificing everybody's sacrifice. And remember, you got to roast it too. So everybody's got all of they got to come. Everybody's got to get their korbanos sacrificed, brought it home, get it set up, roasting it. You can roast on Yom Tov. Right. But on Friday it was even worse. Friday get to start as early as possible, right? But that we'll get into Pesach, Pesachim, right? To get into that deal. Okay. Now, Ditanya, as we learned in the Brisa, Yuchar Davar Shenemar Bo Ba'erev. So it says that the Korban Pesach, which says that you're supposed to do it later because the pasuk says Ba'erev. Bein harbayim ledavar shelo nemar bo ela bein harbayim bilvad, and that means it's later than those other sacrifices where it only says bein harbayim. So erev means you do the things that are bein harbayim, then you do the things that are erev. So bein harbayim is the korban tamid. The korban tamid in the afternoon is going to come first. Then the korban pesach is going to come afterwards. You'll see that when we get to discussing in Pesachim how the afternoon of erev Pesach went in the Beis Hamikdash. That's what they did, right? The korban, the afternoon offering was first. Then the korban pesach was last. So therefore, the word erev tells me that it should be done last. It doesn't tell me that it only can be done in the afternoon.
Okay. We're going to get to the bottom how Rabbi Yeshua could hold then at the 14th, since we have to do it in the evening, which would push it.
So this is an argument between the two sides, between Ben Beseira and Rabbi Yeshua, whether Bein Arbayim means all day or Bein Arbayim means only the afternoon. Umi ikamidi deilu shachit le mitzafra amart zmanehu. So this makes no sense. You're telling me that there's a mitzvah that you could have done it all morning. And then the chimati bein arbayim, as soon as the afternoon comes, amart yuchar davar, you have to stop doing it and bring it in the afternoon? Like that makes no sense. In other words, I brought my morning korban. I could have brought the korban pesach at 10 o'clock in the morning, but I didn't. I was online. I get to the front of the line. It's 1 o'clock. Now they tell me, stop. We've got to do the mincha first. Why? I could have done this an hour ago. Now you tell me it's the time for it, but I got to stop. So that doesn't make sense. If this was the time the whole time, why shouldn't it continue to be the time? So the answer is, don't think that's so strange. That's not so strange. For example, we have that in modern halacha. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, halacha, the halacha is as follows, and this is the halacha. We don't do it because we'll explain why in a moment. Mispalel shel mincha v'achar kach mispalel shel musafin. Let's say you start davening late shachris. I don't know, some places start davening 10:30. Okay. Yeah, they start.
You start at 11.
Okay, so let's hear Chasat Mechassid and you start davening at 11 o'clock. No stories about this. So start Chasat Mechassid, start davening at 11 o'clock, right? And it gets to be 1 o'clock in the afternoon, time to daven Musaf. But it's also time for Mincha now. You could theoretically daven Mincha. The halacha is you should daven Mincha first and push Musaf till afterwards. Because it's the same thing. Mincha becomes the Zman of Mincha, you put Mincha first. Now, in practice, we don't do that because once it becomes a unit, and that's how we daven on a regular basis, now Shachris Musaf goes together, so we always put Shachris Musaf together. But in theory, if you're davening by yourself, let's say you're on a trip or whatever it is, or you wake up late or you're not feeling well, and you wake up late and you daven Shachris late, and it gets to be the afternoon, you haven't davened Mincha and you haven't davened Musaf, which one you do first? You should daven Mincha first, and then daven Musaf.
Isn't Musaf like an add-on for Shabbos then?
It is indeed.
So should we be doing the things that are not add-ons first before you go do the add-ons?
No, you should not. You should do the Mincha first.
Does this apply to Hallel as well?
Hallel is part of Shachris.
Yes.
So you're going to get that done right. Right, correct, yes. Now, Ubein Arbayim dechsiv gabe ketores veneros lamali. So he says, okay, well, if in the end of the day, okay, you're now telling me Bein Arbayim can be understood in two different ways. Okay, let's presume you're right. Then we went out of our way to find psukim to interpret the word Bein Arbayim to mean afternoon when we were talking about the incense and the lighting of the menorah. I have a simple solution. Don't write Bein Arbayim by the lighting of the menorah and the incense at all. I use these other psukim to tell me that they're supposed to be done in the evening. I don't need the Bein Arbaim. Why does it? If Bein Arbaim is a confusing phrase, why not eliminate and erase that phrase altogether? Ve'od, and furthermore, Heshiv Rebbe Tachas ben Beseira, that Rebbe answered on Ben Beseira's behalf, L'diver Rabbi Yeshua, he says, according to Rabbi Yeshua, Lo imamart b'shlosha she'in miktsasa roi, tomar ba'arbasar she'miktsasa roi. How can you say that the 13th, that the korban is not going to be valid? It's just like you said, it's just like the 13th, that if you do it shalol lishma, it should work. When the 14th is a day that part of the day is valid for a korban. Well, time out a second. Ve'im Isa, if what you're suggesting is true, and really the whole time Ben Beseira is really holding that the whole day of the 13th is kosher for the Korban Pesach, Kulo Roihu, he shouldn't say that the 14th is a day that's partially appropriate for the Korban Pesach. He should say the whole day is kosher for the Korban Pesach. So we realize that we've made an error. And really what's happening here is nobody holds that you can bring the Korban Pesach in the morning of Erev Pesach. What really is happening here is the question is only about the eligibility of a Korban brought Shalol Lishma in the morning. What we're saying is, Ella, Rabbi Yochanan is saying, Poso Hayu ben Beseira Pesach Sheshachtu Ba'arba Asar Shachris Bein Lishmo Bein Shalol Lishmo. What Rabbi Yochanan explained is that Ben Beseira is saying, on the morning of the 14th, no matter what you do with a Korban Pesach, if you shecht it for the sake of a Korban Pesach, it's not the right time yet. If you shecht it not for the sake of a Korban Pesach, it's close to being the right time, because today is the right time. Therefore, you're going to ruin your Korban Pesach no matter what you do in the morning, right? That's what he means to say. So he's the opinion who holds there's nothing you can do right by a Korban Pesach if you shecht it on the morning of the 14th. Rabbi Yeshua says it's invalid. Therefore, if you shecht it for the sake of a Korban Pesach, for the sake of a Korban Pesach, it'll be not valid. And if you shake it not for Korban Pesach, then it will be valid, just like the 13th. But Ben Beseira says, no, the 14th has its own rules. The morning of the 14th is not valid for anything. It's going to mess everything up. Hoel miktasa roy, since some of the day, there you go, Roy, right? Since we're, right? Part of the day is Roy. Yeah. Okay. Since part of the day is appropriate for not spelled the same way. Part of the day is appropriate for the Korban Pesach, right? So then you can't say that your Korban Pesach Shalol Lishma is going to be acceptable. So that's his rule. Even as a Shlomim, it won't work because today is a day of Korban Pesach. So even if you think it for Shlomim, it will be invalid.
Why could you thought it would be acceptable as?
It won't be acceptable for anything.
And so basically,
But what you were thinking of.
Let's say you thought it was a Shlomim. Let's say
exactly.
you did, right?
let's say you have to give the korban by Plag Mincha time, basically.
Yeah, you have to wait. Right. Yes, that's
It's
correct.
not acceptable
Plag would be
either way.
ideal, but we're going to see that by Pesach. It's so busy that they even pushed it earlier. Yeah.
If it's not acceptable either way, can you still make a Korban Pesach Ben Arbaim?
Bein Arbaim you can. Yes. Yeah. But you need to get another animal, right? Because the first one's dead. Get another one.
Allegedly. You did it right.
Okay. So now, Megadef ba Rabbi Avo. Rabbi Avo was astonished by this idea. Im Kain Pesach kosher leben b'seir hechim mishkachas. How are you going to ever have a kosher korban Pesach? We're going to have a problem, a technical issue, because id afreshe ha'idna. This was Jeremy was worried about this, separating out. When are you separating out your korban? And I told Jeremy at the time, best don't separate your Pesach into the last minute. Okay,
This is from the
that's always a good yes, right? Best idea, right? Avoid it. However, let's say a guy separates his korban Pesach. We're going to have a problem. Okay, problem goes like this. Let's say the fellow was he has to check the animal, right? He designates his animal a couple of days before. He says, "This is my korban Pesach." Let's say he gets to on the morning of the 14th. He wakes up and he says, "Great, this is my animal. This is my korban Pesach." So the morning of the 14th, this animal cannot be shechted for anything. It's not a kosher korban once you designate it as a Pesach. It can't be shechted not for Pesach, and it can't be shechted yes for a Pesach.
Because it's been designated.
And once you've designated it as Pesach, it can't be shechted for anything. Well, we call that in halacha dochui. Something has been pushed off. Something has been declared ineligible. Once something is declared ineligible, it can never be made eligible again. And so now we have a problem. this morning of the 14th, your animal was ineligible. Therefore, if you designated it as a korban in the morning of the 14th, you have what's called dochoi me'ikaro. It is originally, as soon as you designate this animal as a korban pesach on the morning of the 14th, you can't sacrifice it. And therefore, your animal is ineligible. Now comes the afternoon of the 14th, you can sacrifice it as a korban pesach. But it's too late. It was already ineligible this morning. Now, your other choice is, di'i dafre reshe me'es mol. You could have. It doesn't matter because it's doch. You're not chayav a korban pesach sheni. You can't bring a korban pesach sheni. You're chayav in a korban pesach rishon. If you're a person who's supposed to bring a korban pesach rishon, you can't bring a korban pesach sheni. Right? So id after shay me'as mol. If you're somebody who, if you separated, you decide I'm planning in advance, and you separated it off on the 13th. Okay, then what we have is we have this nira v'nidcha. That means on the 13th. This animal could have been sacrificed as a kosher korban. It could have been brought shelo lishmo as a shlomen. It would have been valid. But then came the morning of the 14th, and now it's nidcha. Can't be brought as anything. So it's nidchahu. So unless you follow Jeremy's advice from this morning, and you don't separate it until the afternoon of the 14th, you're going to ruin every korban pesach. And of course, we know that in practice, people did separate their korban pesachs and declare it in advance. How could that be possible?
Why declare in advance? Say the word if I get a chance this week.
No, well, that wouldn't help you. Because if you get a chance, then it was designated. And if it was designated, it's ruined.
Even the wording, giving it a...
The only solution is Jeremy's solution from this morning, which is don't designate it.
But if you don't designate it, theoretically, the future korbanos would be held outside the walls of Jerusalem, right? Because it's a city.
Okay.
So it's pretty significant travel time, right? So
well,
there's a lot of risk.
You just have to keep the animal outside of the Beis Hamikdash until it's right. You can designate it. You can bring an animal and designate it, and then bring it into the Beis Hamikdash. You just can't you don't have to be outside Yerushalayim.
So you could just designate it and bring it outside the Beis Hamikdash for like a few days beforehand, and then bring it in, right?
That you could do, yeah. You could have an animal designated for you. You can't do shchita outside of the Beis Hamikdash walls, but you can have an animal that is a korban, and while it's still alive, have it outside. Correct. Yeah. That's fine. Ella Amar Rabbi Yavo says, Tehei li'achar chatzos. Jeremy's answer, right? We're going to do it after noon, right? That's when we're going to designate it. Abaye Amar, Abaye says that. I mean, that's a very small answer, right? I mean, what about all the people who want to bring it earlier? So Abaye Amar, Abaye says no. Afilu tema mitzafra. You could designate it in the morning, but how so? Ein mechusar zman lebo bayom. If today is the day, then the morning is not considered not the right valid time. You can't say that you can bring korban pesach. Today is the day you're going to bring korban pesach. Just because right now, this minute, you can't, that doesn't invalidate. You have to have a whole day that you cannot bring. How do you know? Rav Papa says, and Rav Papa says, Afilu tema me'ursa. Even if you go from last night, Laila ein mechusar zman, you could bring it in the morning because why? Because he said from the evening before, because nighttime, every korban has this problem. If I designate an animal, you can never bring any korbanos at night. That means that every korban is going to be invalid overnight, and then it becomes valid again. So that means that it becomes nidcha. No, of course we don't say that. That's built into the system, that night doesn't invalidate. So therefore, night doesn't invalidate. The morning, which is only part of the day, doesn't invalidate. The only way to invalidate a korban is if it becomes permanently or temporarily unusable, right? That would be a nidcha. That would be unusable. And then if it becomes valid again, then it becomes unusable. It remains unusable. Okay? So, Detani debe Rabbi Shmuel. We're in Rabbi Shmuel. Leil Shmini nichnas ledir lis aser. What happens is, the 8th day, what you do is you have your animals, right? And you gather all of your animals that you have born this year into the pen. And you take your animals in their 8th day, every animal, because you don't bring a sacrifice for an animal that's less than 8 days old.
Do you give an animal a bris on the 8th day?
We do not. No brisses, only for humans. So if you have but on the 8th day, you can bring it as a korban, right? So you can bring an animal as a korban only from 8 days on. So you take all your animals, and what you do is you bring them all in, and you want to wait till the 8th day, because now this animal is eligible to be a korban. And now you start going, they go through the pen, and they run down the chute, and you count them off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the 10th one to make it meiser, okay? And you're doing this the night before. Now you say, well, wait a second. How can you designate it the night before if nighttime is not the time for korban? Doesn't that invalidate it? The answer is no. It's not a problem.
How does it not invalidate if the night usually it begins the night before?
Because
And we're about to
nighttime,
find out.
because nighttime is not the time you're allowed to bring korbanos, right? So during that moment in time, you're ineligible to bring any korban. Okay, so but we are saying the answer is that doesn't even, since it's only part of the day, that's not considered an invalidation. And hence, we're going to learn that over to the fact that the morning, which is not a valid moment for bringing Korban Pesach, also isn't going to invalidate our Korban Pesach just because there's a moment in time from sunrise until afternoon that you can't bring this animal as a sacrifice. Okay? It's like Rabbi Apotriki says, Kid Rabbi Apotriki, Rami Ksiv. Rabbi Apotriki, he made a contradiction from the following psukim. V'haya shivas yomim tachas imo. A animal should be living with its mother for 7 days. Can't be brought as a korban. Halayla chazi. That means that the night after 7 days, it becomes acceptable for a korban. Umiyom hashmini v'hala yeratzeh. But on the 8th day and on, it can be brought as a korban. Halayla lo chazi. That means the night before, it's not appropriate to bring as a korban. So ha ketzad. So what does that mean? That means laila likdusha. At night you can sanctify it. V'yom lehirtzah, and during the 8th day, that's when you can actually bring it and have it be a valid korban. Okay, so that's how that works. So nighttime is not an invalidation. Nighttime is an opportunity that you can still designate something with kedusha. Amar Reb Zera l'Reb Yavo. So Reb Zera said to Reb Yavo, "Lema kasavar Reb Yochanan bali chayim nidchin." So he says that means what you also are suggesting here, that if this whole thing becomes a question in the first place, that means Rabbi Yochanan must be of the opinion that a living animal can be made ineligible, right? That's kind of presumed, because this animal's alive. If your answer is that animals that are alive can't be pushed away from the Mizbeach, then the question doesn't even start. Similarly, and he says, yeah, no, you have to believe that, because that is in fact what Rabbi Yochanan holds, and that's why that was a presumption in the question.
Were there animals kept within the Beis HaMikdash?
There were. They're not within the Beis HaMikdash. They had them. There was a pen that was kept. What they would do is we'll learn it when we'll learn Masechtas, the Masechtas that are coming up. That what they would do is they would have a number of animals that they would gather into the pen and watch for several days. So they would have the animals that they would need for the upcoming Korban Ola.
So that's why this is at all relevant, because that's the big pen.
Well, these are personal offerings. These offerings were personals. These were not in the Beis HaMikdash's pen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, these are individual people's Korban
I
Pesach.
see it's just Rabbi Yochanan's opinion that animals can be rejected, because we know that an animal cannot have a blemish. There's many stories of an animal with a blemish getting
Correct.
rejected.
So I'd make sure that we're clear. We're not suggesting, right? We're suggesting that he means that a live animal, that the rule of once something has been declared ineligible, it can never be made re-eligible, is a issue by live animals. Certainly everyone agrees that an animal that has a blemish is ineligible. That's for sure the case. But if for some reason an animal is ineligible for a period of time and then becomes re-eligible, let's take, for example, good example. I have a person we talked about a person who wants to bring a korban chatos. He has a sin offering. And he separates his animal off for a sin offering. And then he decides, you know what, I don't feel like doing tshuva. I don't repent. I'm very happy I did the Aveira. Well, if he does that, his korban chatos is invalid. He can't bring a korban chatos while you have not done tshuva. Okay, the next day the rabbi comes, talks to me, goes, you're right, I changed my mind. I really do want to do tshuva. Once your korban chatos was ineligible, you cannot now make it eligible again. You've got to start all over. Go get another animal and start all over again, right? Hol v'nidcha, right? Once it was declared ineligible, it cannot be made eligible. The animal did not get a blemish, right? So it's a different issue altogether, right? Those are two different things. The animal can get a blemish, that's going to be a problem, right? Right. This is an issue of whether something prevented this animal from being brought as a sacrifice. You cannot ever then rebring it as a korban.
Would this apply if the animal got injured in such a way that would count as a blemish, and then it wouldn't be eligible?
So that whether it seems like a mum over is not the same thing, right?
Okay,
a mum over, right? I don't think so. But I was wondering, as I was saying, is a mum over count as whole v'nidcha yidcha? I'm not sure. not going to say.
Since there'd be so many people bringing animals, could you trade your animal for somebody else's and then sacrifice?
Well, Korban Pesach becomes very different. I don't want to get too detailed into the rules of Korban Pesach, but the answer is no, not by a Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach has to be designated for the sake of these specific owners. So you can't trade.
I think Masechet Pesachim will give us more
Yes.
of an idea.
Yes. So let's get back to our korbanos here, right? Damar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan says, Behema shel shnei shutfin. Here's an example of an animal that was pushed off, okay? The animal belonged to two partners, okay? Hikdish Chesia, one of the partners decides, I want to designate this to the Beis HaMikdash. So he consecrates his animal to the Beis HaMikdash, okay? Can't be brought as a sacrifice because the other half doesn't belong to the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, now what happens? The animal is now immediately sanctified but ineligible for bringing as a sacrifice. The guy goes now and he buys the other half of the animal from his partner. And now he sanctifies the second half of the animal. Kedusha ve'ena kreva. It is holy, but you can't bring it as a sacrifice. Can't bring a sacrifice. Why? Because, as I said, because once it was pushed off, it was ineligible for a period of time. It now is still ineligible. You can't now bring it because it was ineligible for a period of time.
It was ineligible because the person who bought it didn't fully own it.
When he sanctified the first half, he didn't fully own it. And therefore the animal was holy but couldn't be brought, and now it can never be brought. Okay? The oset timura, the rule is also, though, now that the animal has sanctity, if the person says, I would like to exchange this animal for a different animal, I have a better animal, then the new animal also becomes holy, and the first animal retains its kedusha, and you get lashes for it, because you're not allowed to do that. Utmurasa kayotzeba, and the tmura gets the same law as the original animal, i.e., can't be brought as a sacrifice. The original one can't be brought, neither can the tmura be brought. Ushmami notlas. Now, from that statement, right, of Rabbi Yochanan, we learn three things. Number one, shmami no, bali chayim nidchi. Number one, it's a live animal, and it was declared ineligible. It can never be made eligible again. That's number one. Shmami no, dichui meikara havi dichui. Second thing is that if at the moment it was sanctified initially, it was ineligible, that's enough to make it never able to be eligible. And shmami na, and third of all, yesh dichui bedamim, we have a concept of this animal really obtains sanctity only for its value, right? It doesn't have sanctity it doesn't have full korban sanctity, and nevertheless, right, there's such a concept as an animal that isn't going to be able to be brought, but is still pushed away from being sanctified in any event. You cannot now take it and make it eligible. If the first half of it was sanctified for its financial value, essentially, you can't now purchase the second half and make the whole thing eligible to be a korban now. It's never going to work. This animal has sort of a weird quality. We're not using the term kedushas domim. There's usually two types of sanctification of items for the Beis HaMikdash. Kedushas guf means that it has the body of the animal itself is sanctified. It's going to be used as a sacrifice. Then we have something called kedushas domim, which is that it has financial value and it's been sanctified for the sake of I can consecrate any item and say that I want to give this to the Beis HaMikdash so the Beis HaMikdash can use it for its financial value. This animal is under dispute amongst the Rishonim, under the medieval commentators, how you're viewing this animal. Is it holy? Because we're discussing it as a sacrifice, but it really is only financially sanctified because it couldn't be brought as a sacrifice. So it's a little bit of a in-between status. So just point.
If an animal has a mum, it still be kosher for korban?
An animal has a mum, you cannot bring it as a korban. No, right? You have to redeem it and purchase something else. But we will discuss all those deals. Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Ula says in the Rabbi Yochanan, Achal chelev v'hifrish korban. Okay, here's our other case that I brought, right? Person, right, Rabbi Yochanan says, person eats forbidden fats, and he separates a sacrifice for that. V'heimir, and he decides, I'm not doing tshuva. Now, v'heimir does. V'chazer bo, he changes his mind. Hol v'nidcha yidcha. Once his sacrifice has been declared ineligible, as we said, can't use it anymore. Itmar nami, another case Rabbi Yochanan said. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Yavo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Achel chelev, person eats forbidden fats, v'hifrish korban, and he separates out his korban chatos. V'nishtata, the guy goes nuts. Now you have to be of sound mind in order to bring a korban. You can't be crazy to bring a korban. So he goes crazy. V'chazar v'nishtafa. He gets better. Okay? Momentary craziness, right? Ho v'nidcha yidcha, right? Still, once the animal was ineligible for a period of time because he was not mentally well, this animal is now no good. Okay, so that's how this rule works. Okay, and to make sure that we're clear on Jeremy's point, this is not an ineligibility in the animal itself. It's not a blemish in the animal itself. That for sure is ineligible. But this is an ineligibility in the owner, or the animal is being kept away from being a sacrifice for some other reason.
So what happens to the animal in this case? Like because it's been designated already.
Yeah. So you're going to have to put it in pasture until it develops a blemish, sell it, and then purchase ula sacrifices for.
So you can still benefit from the value of the animal.
That's correct, because this is it. Sorry.
Earlier you said you can't trade, because my idea was you could give an animal. You'd say, okay, my animal's invalid for sacrifice. I'll give.
Well, you were talking about a korban pesach. Right? Each korban is going to have separate different rules, right? Korban pesach can't trade, right? Korban, if I have separated something on my, also I can't trade my korban chatos for somebody else's korban chatos. That's going to create problems. But my korban chatos could theoretically become designated for something else. We have that, like in the first Mishnah, where somebody designated almost all offerings minus the korban pesach and the korban chatos not for the sake of its own sacrifice, and it still becomes a similar sacrifice. We know that a Pesach could turn into a Shlomim, for example. There are circumstances where it could happen. But
you also your korban Pesach, and then eventually they find it at the end.
yes, we had those cases as well. Okay, now, Utrichi, I need both of these cases. The case where the person decided he's not doing tshuva, and the case where the person went nuts. Because Diyashmina Kamais, if you told me the first case where the person refused to do tshuva, Mishum dehu dochi nafshe biyadayim. The reason why this animal might not be valid is because he made a conscious decision himself that he wasn't going to do tshuva. Aval hacha, but here, where he goes crazy, demi meleid, it wasn't his fault. Kiyoshandami, we would think it's like he's asleep. You're not physically aware, you're not mentally aware when you're asleep either. So what does that mean? A person designates a sacrifice, he goes to sleep, his korban becomes invalid? Of course not. So therefore, maybe becoming crazy is like going to sleep. No, not so. V'yashmin and hacha, and if you told me the case about the going crazy, mishum de'ein biyod lachzer, that might be because it's stricter because he has no control over when he gets healthy again. Aval hacha, but when it comes to the doing tshuva, de'esh biyad lachzer, he could change his mind whenever he wants. So maybe that korban is not completely pushed off because it's completely up to him to undo his own bad thoughts. Aim Allah, I might say no. So tzricha, therefore I tell you both cases to tell me that the law is the same in both cases. But Rabbi Yirmiyah asks the following question. Achel chelev, person eats forbidden fats, vehifrish korban, and he separates off a sacrifice. Okay? Let's get back into Horius for a moment.
I would say that'd be invalid.
Sorry?
I would say that'd be invalid.
Well, right now, there's nothing invalid about it. That's how all korbanos are brought, right? Yeah, din avera, you separate a korban. Okay? So far, nothing's wrong. But now,
even from the forbidden fat?
well, that's why he's bringing the korban.
Unintentional.
Right? He's not bringing the korban from forbidden fat. He's bringing the korban because he ate forbidden fat, right? He ate non-kosher meat. Now he's bringing a korban. Okay? Vehoru bastin shechelev mutter. Now comes our hori Masech Sorius. Basin comes along and says, you know what? Chelev is permitted in the first place. Okay? Then, so now, at that point, he's not bringing his korban. He says, oh, great, I don't need this korban. So then, v'chazru bahen. Then the basin goes, oops, we made a mistake.
We went through this last.
Mahu, what happens to his personal korban? Mihavi dichui, is his korban been pushed off? Olo havi dichui or not? Because after all, if he would have, he knows he wants to bring a korban, but Basin told him he doesn't need one. So is his sacrifice invalidated or not? So Amar le'ahu Saba. So there was a certain elder who said, Ki pasach Rabbi Yochanan b'dechuyen meha pasach. Actually, when Rabbi Yochanan talked about this whole sugya, about a korban being pushed off, this was how he opened the case. This was the very first case. He said, this is the prime example of a korban which was valid, then became invalidated, because nobody was going to bring this korban, because he relied on Basin. Basin told him it was okay, he doesn't have a korban anymore. And now he comes back, my taima, what's the reason? Hasam gavra idchi, korban lo idchi. Hacha korban nami idchi. He says, look, in those circumstances, right, it's the person, right, that is invalidated, not the animal, right, where the person goes crazy, the person just refuses to do tshuva. But here, This circumstance, right, when Beis Din tells him the entire korban chatos for a chaylev doesn't exist. Nobody's going to bring that at all. So therefore, that's really the quintessential perfect example of something being pushed off. Right? So therefore, nobody would be obligated in it, and therefore, he's not going to bring it. Okay, Amar Shimon ben Azai.
Didn't you say that once he designated it as a sin offering, it's designated? I mean, there's nothing anybody can do. He designated it.
You said you could change chatos to another chatos.
1 second. The answer to that is yes. Once it's designated, then it becomes invalidated in the meantime before he brings it. That's the case of ho'ofen nidcha yidcha. Once it gets invalidated in the meantime, now you can't revalidate it.
But you can't change the chatos to another chatos. That we did say.
You change your chatas to another chat, meaning this animal of a korban chatas for this avera to another avera.
Right.
Yes. Right, we did have that. I believe we had that as an example, as a case that we could do. Right, that was not an invalidating mindset. The problem is that in this case, you may not be. If this animal is a nidcha, then it can never be used for another. Right, that's a circumstance where he has the obligation to bring korban for chaylev, and then he brings it for his other avera of dam, where the animal never became invalidated in the meantime. It was always valid. It was valid as the korban chaylev. Then he switched it to a korban for dam. This is different. It was a korban for chaylev. Then it became invalidated as a korban for chaylev. Now you want to come along and say, no, I'll use it for dam instead? I don't know if you can do that. Became invalid as a sacrifice. In the meantime, it's the same problem. Amar Reb Shimon ben Azai. Now Reb Shimon ben Azai said in our Mishnah, I have a tradition that also olas, right? Olas, you can't change you can't change the intent, right? And he says, Mekublani mipib shivim u'shnaim zakein. It was 72 elders said so. So, lama li lemisna shivim u'shnaim zakein. That's a weird phrase. Grammar is off. 72 elder or 72 elders?
Elders, plural.
Right, zakenim. So why does it say singular? The answer is Dekulu bechad shita sahavu kaimi. It was lev echad, kish echad, belev echad. They were all of one mind, right? So therefore, that's what he was saying. Okay, and we don't hold that way in any event, even though he has his tradition was 72 elders. Lo hosif ben Azai ela ha'ola. The only one that ben Azai was adding on is the ola, right? Because that was the one that is not eaten, so that was what he was coming to include. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, "My time at ben Azai." Where does ben Azai come from? Why does he say this? Olahu. Because the pasuk says it is an ola, right? It shall be, meaning it has to be. So we said chatas hu, right? Even we had the other places where it says asham hu and that's chatas hu. So it has to be hi lishma kshera shelo lishma psula. It has to be done lishma from the word that hu. So if it's not done lishma, it's pasul. Okay, well then if that's why is Ula bringing that korban? What about asham? Asham nami ksiv bei hu. It also says by who. We had gone through this before. The Yashim also says that. And we answered before. We'll answer it again here. That, the word who is written in the wrong place. That who was written when they were burning the fats, not when they were doing the main part of the sacrifice. Therefore, it's not necessary. So, Hainami murim hu dichsiv. He says, yeah, but when it comes to the olah, it also uses the word who after when they're burning the fats. So it also shouldn't be indicating that it requires to be lishma. So the answer is trei hu ksivi. The word who is written twice, right? The word who is written twice. One time in Vayikra Aleph Yud Gimel, Va'akreva Kraim Yirchatz B'mayim, V'akreva Kohen Es HaKol V'iktir Mizbecha Olahu. That's when they're burning the fats. And then one time in Vayikra Hey Yud Tes V'iktarta Kol Ha'ayel Mizbecha Olahu LaHashem. Also, but they're burning it fats. It's only written who is only written by burning fats. But since it's written twice, it's an Eno Inyan situation. If I already know that it was written one time by burning fats, why does it say it a second time? It must be to tell me that it also applies to before burning fats, and it must be done
Why is it
lishma.
specifically only for burning fats?
Why is it written only by burning fats?
For burning fats, yeah.
Because, according to the Chamim, the answer is going to be because it doesn't need to be lishma, right? That's specifically why. So now, Gabe Asham Nami Trehu Ksivi. Well, if that's your answer, by Asham also it has the word who written twice. Ella, so forget that. So the word who is not teaching me that it's required, that has to be Lishma. Rather, Ella Benazeh Bekal V'chomer Ma'isila. He brings it from a Kal V'chomer. And so we've done through these. We know what's coming here. Ma'chato she'ena kalil shachta shalosh mapsula. If a korban chatos if you shach that shalol lishma, it becomes pasul, and it's not as severe as a korban ola because it's not burnt entirely. Ola shikali like ola, which is burnt in its entirety, lo kol shekin. For sure, that offering needs to be done lishma. Yeah, but malachata shekin mechaperes. Well, you can't learn it from the korban ola because the korban chatos is an atonement offering. Maybe that's more severe. Yeah, but Pesach yochiach. I'll bring the korban Pesach because the korban Pesach, right? It doesn't. It needs to be lishma. And it's not an atonement either. Mala Pesach Shkin Zmono Kavua. He says, yeah, but the Korban Pesach has a specific date. That's very significant and strict of that offering. Yeah, Chatos Tuchich. So I'll go back to the Korban Chatos. It doesn't have a strict date. V'chazar Adin. So now we go back and forth between the two. Lo Rizek Rizeh, Lo Rizek Rizeh. The strictnesses of the Osham, of the Chatos, and the strictnesses of the Pesach are not the same ones. So therefore, tzad hashava sheben, you know what is the same between the two? Shem kodshim, they are sacrifices. V'shachtan shalosh man pasul, and if you shech them not for the right name, then they're pasul. Afani of viola, so I'll bring an ola also. Shu kodshim, it is a sacrifice. V'shachtan shalosh man pasul, if you shech it not for the sake of a korban ola, it should be pasul. Yeah, but mala tzad hashava sheben sheyesh bahen tzad kares. Yeah, but a korban chatos and a korban pesach both are related to kares. In that, why do I bring korban chatos? I bring korban chatos when I do an avera that if I had done it on purpose, I would have gotten kares. So I'm bringing a korban for that. Korban pesach also, the Torah tells us that if a person doesn't bring korban pesach, you're chayav kares. Whereas an ola has nothing to do with kares. So therefore, those two offerings, you can't learn from korban pesach and chatos, which talk about kares, back to a korban ola, which has nothing to do with kares. So Ben Azai will say, tzad kares lo parich. The kares of the Pesach and the kares of Chatas are two completely different types of kares references. The Chum are going to say that's a good point. But Ben Azai says, no, it's not. Because one is a kapara for a kares. One is you get kares if you don't do it. That's not the same thing. Okay. So now, Asham Nami Leisei.
Don't you get, oh, I guess not.
Right? Asham Nami Leisei. So, okay. So now, if you're telling me that everything that's an offering has to be brought for the sake of itself, so why not Korban Asham? Then why don't we include that one too? So Asham Parich, so I can have a question on the Korban Asham. Why? He says, because when it comes to the Korban Pesach, right, and the Korban Chatos, there are Korbanos that are community offerings. Now I know that I told Jeremy earlier in the Shiur that a Korban Pesach is a personal offering, or I told Rowie that was a personal offering, right? It is a personal offering in the sense that an individual has to get his own animal and bring it, right? That's whenever we talk about community offerings, generally that's not how it works. The community pays for the animal, the community selects the animal, the community brings the animal. However, the Korban Pesach is community in the sense that you have no choice. You must bring it.
Bring the zone, like raises it from birth?
Or buys it. You can go to the store and buy one,
Okay.
right?
You
So
can-
the pet shop.
Right. So Mashiach comes,
Which means you can't send
and
a
we're
message-
gonna have
which means you can't send a messenger to give it for
like
you.
Sukkot markets, but for Pesach.
That's correct. You'll go to Yerushalayim, right? The average, you have to imagine what it would be like, right? The average person going to Yerushalayim getting ready for Pesach, right? Yeah. You're gonna gather up all of your Meiser Sheni money with you, right? You're gonna go to Yerushalayim. You're going to take money and you're going to go to the market right when you get there, right? The first thing that you got to do is you got to go buy your sacrifices for Aliyah L'Regel. We'll talk about that when we're in Maseches Chagiga, right? You've got sacrifices that you have to bring olas and shlamims because that's your Yom Tov meal, right? You're going to bring a korban, you're going to bring korbanos to the Beis HaMikdash that every individual has an obligation to bring on Yontif, okay? Then you're going to get then you got to go shopping and buy a korban Pesach, right? You bring your korban Pesach also. And so you're buying all these animals, right? It would make little sense for you to schlep all your animals up with you. So you probably buy them there. They have animal marketplaces, and all the shepherds, I'm sure, are herding and bringing all their animals there, just like like you said, the Sukkot marketplace. All the animals there. You pick out here's your sheep for $50, your Mehuder sheep, the olive sheep, the olive sheep, right?
It's pretty cheap for a sheep.
Somebody told me I could buy a sheep for $50. I don't know. You go online.
Fit for a korban?
Okay. We'll do that next
If
time.
it's cheap for $50, I'll
They're not
consider buying one.
That's American, not Canadian.
Once it becomes kosher for korbanos, right? So now.
So Rabbi Loiterman, you share a Korban Pesach with the
So you're going to share a Korban Pesach with a few people, right? You're going to share with a few people. Correct. So therefore, that's what it's going to be like, right? So you're showing up, you're bringing your money, and everybody's spending money, and they're bringing korbanos. Okay, so now. V'bois ema, or else if you want to say tzad kares nami parich, that you can also ask the same point that the korban pesach you can't there's tzad kares also exists that bothers him also. That Benazai, we said that doesn't bother him about the tzad kares. That's why he learns for the ola, but maybe he does. And then the question is still in Benazai, why is it that you have a problem with the korban ola? He says Benazai Gemara Gemira law. Benazai just had a teaching from his teachers. He didn't halacha Moshe Misinai, no source, but he said he had these 72 elders that told him so. So that's why he did it. And that which he was telling Rav Huna that he had a kal v'chomer, he didn't really have a kal v'chomer. Lo amra el lechaded ba talmidav. He was just trying to sharpen his students, right? Make them sharp.
Prove a point.
Yeah, help them to think better, right? So therefore, we're thinking about why it could be. But really, the reason why he held the way he held is because that was what his Rebbe had taught him. Right? Halach Moshe Misinai. So that is where we will stop for today. Mishnah will continue tomorrow. The new Mishnah.
Wonderful. 9 a.m.
9 a.m.